Hi, and welcome to SF Live. I'm your host, Christina Marie Flores. Well, tonight our guest is raised in Kansas, has worked in the corporate world, is a Vietnam veteran, the financial manager of Good Vibrations, was appointed to the Civil Rights Commission, and now serves as the president of the SF Police Commission. Please help me welcome this evening, Theresa Sparks.
Thank you, Christina.
I'm just exhausted saying all of that. That's the most unusual route that I've ever seen to get to be the police
Yeah, it is.
president.
It is unusual. And normally the president of the commissions have been lawyers. And I'm not a lawyer, obviously. So for a long time I was, president of Good Vibrations and president of the Police Commission. And those were kind of an odd combination as well.
I'll say, wow, yeah, definitely. So let's start you off. You started off in Kansas.
I did.
And your mom, it says that your father served in the Army and the Navy. And you describe him as fearless, that he would talk to anyone.
He would.
Very social guy.
He was, very social guy. He was like the world's best salesman. I mean, he talked to everybody and everybody loved him.
And he would bring coffee to the different businesses?
Well, he owned a coffee company. And so what they did was they brewed all of the 5,000 gallons of coffee a day, and they delivered it in like these big thermoses to various businesses in the city. And so from the time I was little, I used to go to work with him and go with him. So, he was a real entrepreneur, and I kind of grew up that way.
And your mom you describe her as very intelligent and an understanding woman.
She was. She was a stay-at-home mom. She was real typical of the time. And, she was kind of the strength behind the family. My dad was kind of the outside guy, and she was kind of the inside person, And she was a wonderful person.
And what was life like in Kansas while you were young?
Oh, I grew up in Beaver Cleaverland. I mean, really, it was like a little house, and we had neighbors, and the grade school was down the street. And I mean, it was real, just middle class, Midwest. And I had a great childhood. I had no question about it.
What did you want to be when you were a kid?
I wanted to be in the Army. All my life, I wanted to be in the Army. In fact, my first experience with politics was that when I graduated from high school, I had obtained an appointment to the U.S. Military Academy in West Point, and that's what I'd always wanted to be as a career soldier. And 2 weeks before I was supposed to go, I got a letter from the senator who had appointed me and said that he'd found a more qualified candidate and that I was going to have to be an alternate. And as it turned out, the more qualified candidate was his nephew, who lasted only 3 months and then dropped out.
Oh, that's not fair.
Yeah.
So you eventually did go into the service. Was it the Army that you went into?
I went in the Navy.
In the Navy. And what position did you have there?
I was kind of a fancy clerk. I worked at an intelligence center in Hawaii for a year, and then I was on a boat for a year as an intelligence clerk, kind of a person.
Was it a good fit for what you wanted to be a soldier and you were there?
No, I was, at that point, I kind of was a rebel, I mean, I used to wear my shower shoes to work every day, and it really used to get mad at me, but there really wasn't anything they could do because, they had to have everybody, and they couldn't, discharge you, and so I was kind of there, and I was just kind of a pain in everyone's rear end, but it was fine. I served, 2 years honorably, and over 2 years, and got out, and, it was what it was. It's one of those things. I'm really glad I did it, but I would never obviously want to do it again any time in my life. But interestingly enough, my oldest son is in fact a career Marine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you have 3 children?
I do. I have my oldest son, who's a career Marine. He's a captain in the Marine Corps. And my daughter works for a company, a dating company, a company in the Midwest that does dating services things, and she's does all their computer stuff, internet stuff. And then my youngest son always was a bartender, and he did stand-up comedy for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
in Kansas.
It runs in the family.
Well, what he would do is, he would try it out as a bartender. And, the stories would be is all these girls would be lined up because he was so funny, and then he'd get on the bar, and then he really did well, so they gave him a megaphone, and, it's kind of like that, yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Very cool. So after you were in the services, then you came out, and you were married then?
I was.
And that was your first, you've been married twice.
I've been married twice.
So when you were married, you came out to your wife at the time that you had different feelings. And could you explain a little bit to us about what transpired when you spoke about what you were feeling at that time?
Well, we'd been married quite a while. I mean, 7, 8 years, and I had 3 kids, and we're married very young, and weren't doing really that well anyway. And so I started, having issues with my gender identity and problems that I'd had all my life, but they kind of manifest themselves in odd ways, in different ways, and so I thought, I needed to tell somebody, because at that point, when you do that, particularly back then, there was no internet. And so you really do think you're alone in this thing. You think you're just weird because there's nowhere to go to look and to see. And so I decided that I needed to tell someone, and so I told my best friend, who was my wife at the time, and she totally freaked out and asked me to leave, which I did, and we ended up getting divorced. So it all happened very quickly from that point.
And did you have anyone growing up that you knew that you could speak with about it? Not at all until that point.
No, not really.
It's amazing that the internet now is so open that you really can communicate and find other people.
It is, and and there's lots of people out there now. And but even I even went to psychiatrists and psychologists back then for other issues. But in reality, I wanted to find out about this, and I had psychologists tell me that it was good because they would learn about this with me as we were
really,
so they didn't even know anything about it, and so it was difficult back then. And a lot of people my age who ended up transitioning, I think, had very similar experiences.
So it was at the very beginning of when therapists got to learn on how to speak with or deal with.
Well, Christina Jorgensen, was in the 60s, and she was one of the first that was highly publicized. Stanford and Johns Hopkins University started gender identity clinics, I think in the 70s, I want to say, late 70s, early 80s maybe. And so there was starting to be in academia, there was some research done on it, and, it just kind of grew from there. But I would say the internet probably was the biggest thing ever for people's understanding of what gender identity is.
It brings them together to be able to have a discussion. So when you first went through the different therapy sessions, was it to try to talk yourself out of it? Or
Absolutely.
It wasn't...
Well, you just want to understand it, but ultimately you want it to go away. You want to be normal. You just want it to go away. You want to be normal. You don't want to deal with this. And a lot of times the way psychiatrists, I did electric shock treatment for a period in the 80s, and for a very short period, because I figured at that point that really wasn't going to work. But they tried to, for whatever reason, they want you to talk through it and reinforce the feelings of guilt back then. And so if they figure if you're guilty enough about it, that you'll stop. And you do for a while. But that's not a solution. That just makes you guilty. Makes you feel worse, ultimately.
That's amazing to me that it was as recent as the 80s that they were still doing those procedures. And it's incredible to me. I've just been around, San Francisco so long that I'm in this wonderful place where everybody is who they are.
Well, that was actually in Los Angeles.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so it was in California, too.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
it was in
amazing.
the early 80s.
And at what point in the therapy that you went to did you decide, this is who I am? I'm not trying to change
that actually didn't happen until the late 90s, until 96, 97. And I actually came to San Francisco intentionally because not only did I love the city, because I'd been here many times, but I came here, I moved here in 97 just specifically because I knew there were a qualified gender therapist here. And I actually started going to see 2 simultaneously because the way I am, I never trust one. So I'd have to go see 2. And so I actually went to 2 at the same time for over a year to figure it out.
Now, at that time, you have 3 children. And what were the children saying? Were you out to them? Did they understand?
I did, and they didn't. I came out to them in the mid-90s. Actually, take that back. I came out to them in, the mid-90s, 97, 98. And neither one of my sons spoke to me after that for a long time, for almost 10 years. My daughter did, and she tried to understand, and she did. It was a little difficult at first. But as time went on, we became friends, and then we became best friends, and today we are best friends.
That's wonderful.
And so she's kind of supported me all the way through. My 2 sons, I reinstituted the relationship. It's literally been in the last year.
Wow, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you came here in 97?
Uh-huh.
And